Welcome back. Today we're in the beautiful Breisgau region at the company Inakustik. You might know Inakustik as a cable manufacturer, maybe also as a music label, or perhaps as a distributor for Scandinavian hi-fi products. A very broad product portfolio, which we're going to take a closer look at now. Come along.
Hi Jürgen, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Glad you could make it.
Great. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course, my pleasure.
Man, I see you've got a whole lot of new music here again. With you or with you guys, I always wonder, is music the most important thing or is it your cable manufacturing? You do so many different things.
Music used to make up 50% of our revenue back in the day when we were still selling physical CDs. But that's dropped off significantly. Cables are actually the bigger area in the company.
But now, in terms of manufacturing, do you really do everything in-house here or do you still get some things from external sources?
We have different quality lines. In the lower two lines, quite a bit still comes from external suppliers. But we're trying to do more and more here ourselves. That's why we have our air technology, which is set up entirely here and is also manufactured here in our facility. Of course, it was developed beforehand by Holger Wachsmann, who is the brain here. And then we try to build the products here in such a way that it's enjoyable for the end customers.
And what does that have to do with the distribution brands you have in your range? Is that a way to round things out?
Everything we do here is about listening to good music. Really, it's about hearing the music that an artist has created somewhere, whether live or in the studio. What they've come up with, that's what we're trying to bring into people's living rooms. And we realized that just using cables wouldn't get us there. We need sources, we need amplifiers. And that's precisely how we ended up choosing the Primer brand back then. And with Audio Vector, we have a speaker that, in my honest opinion, reproduces music in a very, very, very natural way. And that's precisely why we set up this system, so that we can truly enjoy the music all the way through, just as the original artist genuinely intended.
You've been at this location for quite a long time now, haven't you? When did it all actually start?
Mr. Samsa founded the company back in the mid-70s. Back then, it all started directly with accessories, with cables. Those were good times. Back then, only twin cables existed, black insulated and stiff. And I think the first highlight was simply managing to get a highly flexible insulation. And later on, more technologies were added and the cable range kept expanding. In the 80s, people started making direct recordings with music. That was the beginning of the era when we basically tried to record everything digitally and master it digitally. Of course, we had already made LPs, but at that time, the CD was also important. That was something new. So we jumped on that bandwagon. Today, things are shifting again. Now people prefer to have everything in analog. We are looking for raw material. But well, times simply change. That's actually what unites us all here. That we make music something to enjoy. That's our credo, and most of the team truly lives by it.
If you're such a manufacturing company, where exactly is your core business? Is it here in Germany, more in Europe, or even worldwide?
Well, we export over 70%, and it's like this. The classic markets are North America, Asia, and Europe. Of course, Germany is the largest single market because it's simply our home market. But most of it actually goes to export, and we're really growing in exports year after year.
I can imagine that, especially in Germany, organizations like TÜV and VDE and the like take a very close look at things. You test all of that here, right?
In our industry, there are a lot of products that you really should take a much closer look at. For example, we've only been making power cables since 2016, because before that we didn't feel confident enough to do it. And then we met someone who guided us a bit so that we could carry out all the necessary tests and ensure that everything is CE compliant with all the standards behind it. And we still send individual products to the lab or to different labs to get the official certifications, because electricity, 230 volts, well, if you get stuck on that, it's really not pleasant if something were to happen. So it just has to be safe, it has to be secure.
You just mentioned AAA, all analog. Is there anything new coming from you guys soon?
Yes, we're going to get things rolling again with tape reels. We have old recordings, some of which we have in analog form, and we've had them remastered again with Stickel in Vienna, then have them copied onto tape and offer them in the markets accordingly. But of course, we have our Resos. There's something new coming for that soon. After that, we'll be concluding the series. But with the same technology, we'll be bringing SAM to the market, selected audio music. But I think you'll be meeting some colleagues this afternoon who might want to say a bit more about that, and I don't want to get ahead of them.
Great, that sounds exciting. All right, then maybe I'll go check in with Holger, because the topic of cables and power cables is something I'm really interested in. Holger Inakustik is known for its speaker cables, RCA cables, HDMI cables, but you also offer power cables and power supplies. What makes those so special and unique?
Well, power supply is still greatly underestimated in the hi-fi scene and in other areas as well, but it's actually the foundation on which the entire hi-fi system is built. We have a lot of interference in the power grid, and this overlaps with the 230 volt alternating current on the one hand. And since we're all completely connected to the power grid, this interference ends up in my hi-fi system. And the goal here is to filter out these disturbances from the power grid as much as possible. That's exactly the job, for example, of filter systems. And the other thing, of course, is that when I have a power supply, I have my hi-fi components connected to it. These are usually several devices that are connected to the power grid. That means they are connected to each other via the power network. They're also connected to each other with signal cables, for example, and that creates a loop, a circuit. Despite galvanic isolation, I have still created a circuit through capacitive coupling, and this also needs to be broken up, or rather brought as close together as possible so that all devices operate at the same voltage level and potential. These are the kinds of issues that make the whole thing interesting and also highlight the importance of power supply for hi-fi components.
When I look at your power cables, they're constructed completely differently. Why do you do that? Why go to all that trouble?
Everything has its reason. I've got a cable here. This is what you're referring to when you look at how a cable is constructed. And here you can really see the complex structure. On the one hand, there's a large total cross-section, and because of this complexity, you also get very low inductance values. These little adjustment screws that you have to turn, and you also have to know in which direction to turn them, are all about supplying the components with power as efficiently as possible, minimizing losses, and also generating the lowest possible compensation currents over signal lines. The goal is to eliminate that interference noise, which would normally spread across the audio signal, mask it, and obscure everything.
But let's take this a step further. We have a hi-fi system with many components. Usually a power strip or a multi-outlet distribution is needed for that. When I look at your current power strip, I notice that you use so-called rails, for example, not cables, but actual solid copper bus bars. Why do you do that?
We need a certain cross-section in principle, as you just mentioned with the power strip, in this case the 6 power outlets, to bring them electrically very close together. And the main thing, of course, is to keep the ohmic resistance as low as possible. And we can achieve that very well with these bus bars because they allow us to have large cross-sections in a very compact way.
Finally, let's talk about the topic of safety. You just mentioned it. Electricity at home is truly a safety-critical issue. What kind of effort do you put in to ensure that every product leaving your factory here guarantees absolute 100% safety for the end customer?
So what I'm trying to say is that it actually starts already during the design phase, where you start thinking about how to make the thing safe later on. Then it continues with what's called type testing. So that's basically where the development is tested. We do part of that in-house. And for some parts, we also go to an external lab, like we did with the power strip, for example. We had that tested externally. And then from a development perspective, the product is completed and approved. After that, it moves on to production, to the manufacturing stage, where after assembly, we also test each individual unit. So every single power strip, every single power cable before it gets packaged is 100% tested by us. There are special testing devices for this, which then carry out the CE testing. This includes protective earth conductor test, in other words, a high current test. We perform high voltage tests to check whether any insulation might be damaged, as well as functional tests, insulation tests, and touch current tests. All these things are covered by the devices, and these devices have what's called a legally admissible memory. That means the measurement result is linked to the serial number and then stored. We can't change or tamper with it in any way or anything like that. And if something were to happen, God forbidden, we can basically say, look, the device or the power cable, whatever it is, was tested by us. Here's the proof. It left our facility in perfect condition.
That all sounds very exciting, but unfortunately also very high-end and maybe a bit expensive. Do you also have some simpler solutions?
Yes, we always have a very, very large selection here. It starts with just a few euros for a meter of speaker cable all the way up to what we just discussed, which can really break through certain sound barriers. But of course, we want to satisfy many customers, and my colleague Oliver Hengst can also tell you a bit more about that.
I'm curious to hear more. Oliver, Inacoustic surely doesn't just make very high-end cables, but also perhaps more affordable ones, right? Is that the case?
That's right. Of course, we became well known through the high-end sector thanks to our own manufacturing. And all the experience we gained from that, we naturally channel back into our entry-level range. We have a series model starting with Star and Premium, where even there we pay attention to materials, to good connectivity, making sure the plugs fit well. I'd like to demonstrate this as an example that the plugs fit securely in the sockets, which is often not the case with cheap cables.
They sometimes wobble.
Yes, for example, they sometimes wobble. Proper gold plating so they don't corrode. Also, strain relief area cable should be able to handle a bit of stress and so on. That's the main focus we place on affordable cables. And then the cable costs around 20 or 30 euros, which for us is an entry-level model, but for others might already be a lot, right? But we don't recommend cheap cables because too many things can go wrong. It can act as an antenna, interference can creep in, and with proper shielding, for example, that's already taken care of, you know. Here, for example, is our Premium series, which is made very, very sturdy with a distinctive textile look. As you can clearly see here, you can really bend and handle it with ease and confidence, demonstrating its exceptional durability and robust construction. It's nicely molded, and that's the main focus we put on our affordable cable series. Of course, always ensuring that the signal flow is consistently good, you know.
And this is an optical cable, as I can see here. Sometimes you're really afraid you might break it.
Yes, exactly. And that's where, for example, this kind of mechanical stability comes in. This one, for example, has a bending radius. There's nylon inside, not fiberglass. That means you can really bend it nicely. And especially here at the installation site, there's often not much space, and it's often under strain here. Then sometimes another cable ends up lying on top of this cable. And these are exactly the kinds of things we pay close attention to. And of course, the quality of the connector. That means this connector stays plugged in, it clicks into place, it doesn't wobble, and it won't just fall out on its own.
And what about speaker cables?
Well, in that area, we're very well equipped because we basically manufacture everything ourselves here. Here too, a cable is pretty simple for us to make, but there's still technology involved, like using polyethylene as the insulation material, which is simply a better insulator than PVC because it creates less capacitance. And it's like this with a system, you know, it's like the chain breaks at its weakest link, and that's often the cables, you know, and basically it all has to be a coherent system. We also give out this rough rule of thumb. You should definitely invest about 10 to 20% in cables, right? That was just meant as a value-based guideline. So if you buy a pair of speakers for 2,000 euros, then a cable can easily cost at least 200 euros, just as a ballpark figure. That way it often fits technically into the whole setup as well.
That's a really valuable tip, and I'm curious to hear how it can sound. And now let's move from theory to practice and check it out in the listening room. Tobias, we're sitting here with you in a beautiful listening room, as I've noticed. One of several listening rooms you have. Why do you actually have them?
Well, primarily because, of course, we can talk a lot about our technology and the physical background, but the main focus should really be on the experience, the live experience, listening to music, enjoying music as such. And that's exactly what we want to offer here in our listening rooms to end customers who are interested. That's the main reason why we do this here. A second reason is purely logistical as well. Our specialist retail partners, our brand partners, can hardly cover the entire repertoire, the full range. So here we have the opportunity to make that possible and offer it logically. That's the second reason. But as I said, essentially it's about conveying the emotion here in our listening rooms, the emotion that's behind the technology, so to speak.
I actually imagine that's quite difficult. How do you, for example, listen to a power cable?
Well, of course, it depends on the environment you're in. Are you surrounded by industry? Do you have a photovoltaic system on the roof, and so on and so forth? Depending on the initial situation, the impact can be greater or smaller. But in fact, based on the experience we've had here in our listening room with our end customers, it's actually the case that we get the biggest wow effect when we turn our power filter on or off. When we do A/B comparisons, it's always astonishing. And it's also interesting to see that many people aren't even aware that electricity basically forms the foundation for every system. A lot of people don't even have that on their radar. So that's always interesting to observe as well. And that's also one of the reasons why it's important for us to have the end customers here, so we can facilitate this kind of knowledge transfer and also learn ourselves. Where are the gaps still out there? Where is there still a need for clarification? You provide input, but you also get a lot of inspiration about where you can still make improvements as a sales team, as a manufacturer, as a producer, when it comes to knowledge transfer. So in that respect, it's a very interesting experience every single time all over again.
So how should I imagine such a listening session, such a cable comparison? How much time do I need to set aside?
We cover a lot of things in advance so that we can optimally prepare for their needs and make the day or afternoon as effective and efficient as possible. That's already the first step. And then we assume that such a session usually lasts about 1.5 to 2 hours on average. That's what our experience has shown so far, but it can definitely turn into 3 or 4 hours as well. It just depends a bit on the flow you get into. We usually also offer individual consultations. We take the time for each individual listener, for each interested person, in addition to group events. For example, this could be something like primary streaming days or the analog days here at our place, where we simply offer such topics to an entire group, and then we welcome 15 to 20 end customers here at our facility and philosophize together about the respective topic.
That's very nice. Above all, it's also a great service for an individual session. But if I don't have an audio vector speaker at home, the kind you have in your product range, but instead a speaker from another brand, am I allowed to bring it with me to such a listening session?
Well, you also mentioned cable comparisons earlier. So cable comparison is something we can cover if that's of interest. We cover the full range of listening experiences. That can be a cable comparison, but it doesn't have to be. And we offer the service that if the customer wishes, they can also bring individual components from their own setup, so they can connect them with the component they'd like to try from us, ensuring they have as authentic an experience as possible under the conditions they have at home. That's absolutely no problem. We're up for anything, so to speak, and we're open to everything.
Now, it's not just cables, speakers, and the primary amplifiers that you have, but music also plays a big role for you. Music is the fuel behind all of this, and for years you've been known for your CDs, HQ CDs, and the like. I've heard there's something new from you.
Absolutely, and I actually brought it with me to show you right away. So this is basically fresh from the pressing plant, so to speak. It's called the SAM edition. SAM stands for Selected Audiophile Music, and it's essentially a series that will replace the Reference Sound Edition in the future. This is also a sampler that's pressed not just on HQ CD, but actually a step further on UHQ CD, that is the ultimate high-quality CD, and on audiophile vinyl. There are two key features that play a role here, especially with the SAM. One of them is the mastering. This is handled for us by the Bauer Studios in Ludwigsburg, where they use analog equalizers, dynamic processing, and so on. But above all, it's the experience of the sound engineers who try to tease out that certain something from the existing content. That's one side of the coin, and the other side is, as you already mentioned, the recording medium itself. In this case, it's the ultimate high-quality CD. What's special about it, or what makes it unique? A CD also has these pits and lands, meaning the raised and recessed areas that essentially represent the ones and zeros. And with an ultimate high-quality CD, the use of photopolymer, which is a somewhat higher quality material than the polycarbonate typically used in CDs, makes a difference. This material is capable of reproducing these structures more precisely. That means detecting these raised and recessed areas becomes easier. You can imagine it like this. It's as if a musician has a score in front of him, the same score printed on two different sheets of paper. One is crumpled, the other is printed perfectly clean. He has the same information on both sheets, but with the crumpled one, he always has to look more closely and might miss a note here and there. So it doesn't come across to him as easily as it does on the glossy paper. And in a similar, very simplified way, that's how it is from a regular CD to a UHQ CD. By the way, there's another difference when it comes to the Reference Sound Edition. So it doesn't come across to him as easily as it does on the glossy paper. And in a very simplified way, that's similar to the difference between a regular CD and a UHQ CD. By the way, there's also a difference compared to the Reference Sound Edition. With the Reference Sound Edition, as far as the content is concerned, we've always dedicated ourselves to specific themes. So there was the Great Voices, which was, so to speak, the mother of the Reference Sound Edition, or themes like Great Guitars, Great Cover of Songs, Great Men of Songs, Great Women of Songs.
So there were always specific themes, and with the SAM, Thorsten Ilg, who put this together for us, he's a new colleague in the music department, basically compiled a sampler where we move across all genres. So on the first one, there's jazz, pop, singer-songwriter, but also classical elements all the way to electronic tracks. So now we're taking the approach of trying to cover as broad a spectrum of musical styles as possible in order to see what the system can do with different genres of music. That's also a difference compared to the reference sound edition. And as you can see, the artwork as well, right? So we've brought on board an artist from Freiburg who will create a unique custom painted cover for each edition that will be released in the future.
Artwork is a really important topic, especially when it comes to vinyl, to LPs. For those who no longer listen to CDs, they can certainly get this SAM as an LP as well, if I understood correctly.
Exactly. As a direct metal master LP, exactly.
Yes, music is a very important topic. I know that you also support live music. You are active together with artists. Are there listening sessions?
Yes, in fact, last November we started what I'd call a pilot project. We organized an evening event, which we called Sound of Luxury, and launched a sound experiment there. That evening, we had Friend and Fellow perform live for us or for the guests, and afterwards, the same tracks were played back on a high-end system, simply to show the guests what such systems are capable of reproducing. Of course, the goal is for the sound to reach the listener as unaltered as possible, and that's exactly what we wanted to demonstrate that evening, that the systems we offer here are capable of achieving that. It was a really exciting experience for us, and it's definitely high on our agenda to offer such evenings again in the future. So if you're interested, you might want to sign up for our newsletter. That way you'll always be up to date on what we're doing here in the listening rooms. It was a super exciting experience, definitely.
Are there other things you can experience with you besides the listening sessions?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, there's also our workshop.
Mm-hmm.
It's transparent, as they say. We also offer customers who visit our listening rooms here the opportunity, if they wish, to take a look into our workshop. And it's always nice to see what it does to people when we take a walk through the production area, through the workshop, and you can see them thinking like, wow, this really is handmade. Yes, we don't just say it, it really is handmade. When they see our colleagues, the cable builders, putting the clips together and so on, and realize that all of this is truly intricate handwork, it's always a great experience for the guests we welcome here. And of course, there's also the opportunity to interact with the product developer himself, even with Holger Wachsmann. That's always an experience as well, because Holger is able to explain even the most complex technical concepts in a way that even non-physicists can understand. And together with the images from the workshop, that's also, at least that's how we see it, a wonderful experience for our customers and guests here at our facility.
And I think there will soon be a film experience at your place as well, because I believe you're currently building a home theater room, right?
A Dolby Atmos 5.1.4 system will be installed there initially, of course, with Audio Vector. So that's another feature we can offer here, an immersive home cinema experience. And in this way, we can actually cover all aspects of music and film listening, as well as movie watching here in our facility.
Hey, I was just with Tobias and he told me something really interesting about auditioning. And I said, you're the expert and can give me some more details.
I hope so. So we offer the end customer, if he wants, the opportunity to simply listen to the product at home on his familiar system. He can apply here and say, hey, I would like to listen to a cable at home. He can also have it explained to him again here via video if he wants. Ultimately, it's about the fact that I can really only judge whether something suits me if I listen to it on my own system at home. And we offer the option to borrow it for 14 days at home. It's free of charge for the end customer. We take care of both delivery and return shipping, and we just ask that at the end of the trial they maybe write a short review of their experience. If someone still needs a bit of support, we have contacts here who can help out, answer a few questions about the technology, and we've been doing this for several years now. And as far as I hear, it's very well received by the end customers.
It's a great service too, because the acoustics at my home are completely different from those at any specialist dealer. But tell me, how does it work? Which products from your range can I actually borrow? Is it the whole range or just a part of it?
We don't do it quite like that. We only ever lend out one device or one cable at a time because we found that if you lend out too much, the customer doesn't even know anymore, hey, what's actually changing now? Is it this one or is it that one? And that's why we're very strict about only lending out one product at a time. And sometimes during a conversation, someone might say, oh, but I'm also interested in something else. Okay, then yes, but it's never the case that we send out 2 or 3 cables or 2 or 3 primer devices, always just one.
Really fantastic.
I'm glad to hear that.
What does it truly look like? For example, if I imagine you receive a brand new line of high quality speakers, say from AudioVector, delivered right here. You then meticulously connect them with a powerful primer amplifier combination, and now there's an important trade show coming up and you want to showcase them effectively there. Do you simply test your speaker cables and interconnects randomly, or what is your precise approach to finding the absolutely right matching?
Basically, a brand new speaker series is usually introduced at the factory for the first time. So we first get a general impression there of what makes the speakers special, what they can do, and how they're constructed. And when we then get the speakers here, of course, we try them out. Naturally, we always make sure they are working perfectly.
Now, it's certainly the case that as a product manager, you also look at such products from a technical perspective. Let's take the specific keyword tweeter here as a prime example. We have a particular technology here that deviates somewhat significantly from the standard dome tweeters, offering a distinct and innovative approach.
These here, they come from ScanSpeak and are built according to AudioVector's specifications. By the way, that's the case with all the drivers. AudioVector doesn't use off-the-shelf drivers, but rather all of them are in-house developments that are then manufactured by ScanSpeak exclusively for AudioVector.
And if I may bring up the Primaire for a brief moment, I mean, it is a very small, incredibly compact and quite remarkable device. It's actually ideal, just like it's set up here on this small, low board for households that no longer want to stack the classic tower of components. How do customers respond to that?
A unit like the i15 is actually very, very well received by customers, but in fact, it's a truly extremely small compact amplifier that still delivers plenty of power. You really underestimate this incredible device, how much raw power it truly has under its sleek hood, and in terms of its overall sound quality, it's truly and absolutely phenomenal.
I see there's a Hypex power amplifier working away inside. Those are known to be very power efficient. Also, a solid selection of connections. As a music label, you're probably also interested in selling the analog version, especially when it comes to the phono input, since vinyl records are a big topic for you. What would you recommend to the customer? Which version should they choose?
Personally, I would definitely say the i15 in the Prisma version, in other words, the excellent digital version with its integrated DAC and streaming module, and for the dedicated phono section, an R15. The R15 is a phono preamplifier that sounds truly phenomenal and offers great adjustment options. It can operate with pretty much any cartridge system available and actually competes quite favorably in a much higher price range. So in that respect, you can definitely say the i15 Prisma and the R15. That way, I really have a truly phenomenal and comprehensive combination for listening to both digital and analog music, and both in extremely high quality.
You're responsible for music at Inakustik. What exactly do you do there?
Basically, I actually do everything from the initial productions, handling all legal clarifications, managing licenses, dealing with GEMA, and coordinating artist contacts. The entire comprehensive story where you truly deal with a great many different people.
When I look around here, you actually have Michael Schenker's original guitar hanging on the wall. 400,000 albums sold. What does it feel like to know such stars and, above all, to be able to publish their music?
Well, I always say that there are no stars, there are only people. Some are certainly more pleasant and agreeable to work with than others, but it's truly fun and rewarding to collaborate with them. They always bring fresh, new and diverse ideas into your mind as well, so you don't become one-dimensional and always think in the exact same direction. And that's really the beautiful thing about being able to work with so many different artists, that you can always stay mentally active.
When I look at your current and extensive catalogue, I also clearly see that you cover a very wide and diverse musical spectrum. That means everything is included here, from hard rock to jazz. How does that work? How should I imagine that? How do you find music that you would like to have on your label?
I have a standard saying for that. There are essentially 4 distinct types of music: truly good music, genuinely bad music, music that consistently sells, and music that simply doesn't sell at all. I look at everything. I even listen to everything privately too. Even after working in the industry for 50 years, if you still get a wow effect, then it's good music.
And when we talk about exciting music, at some point we're of course also talking about business and about physical media. Over all these years, tell us about it. From vinyl records to CDs and now to other media. How did you experience that? How did the development go here at InAcoustic?
InAcoustic has always been a little ahead of the curve when it comes to technology. That means InAcoustic already started working with CDs in the early 80s. We were already selling direct cut records in the early 1980s. But for me, the most exciting and innovative time was actually with the music DVD, which we launched at the end of the 1990s, where we kept introducing innovations. We brought the world's very first DVD-10 to the market. Then, around the years 2010 or 2012, the era of physical DVD and Blu-ray discs started to significantly decline. And we, as a company, said, okay, what is it that truly and fundamentally defines us in general? That's good picture quality and good sound fidelity.
We've been experiencing the vinyl boom for several years now, but you have something truly new again, or should I say, something new that's actually quite old, prepared to finally come to market. What's behind this idea?
Behind this fundamental idea lies our long-standing credo to deliver sound to our valued consumers, to our esteemed customers in its purest, most unaltered form. Master tape. Let's talk openly, master tapes. Of course, that's the only medium where I can transmit the sound without any intermediate step. If I make vinyl, there's an intermediate step, and with CD, even more so. Even with UHQ CDs, which sound particularly good, there are still intermediate steps. But if I use a master tape, it's a truly one-to-one transfer. I meticulously take the original analog tape as the primary master and then carefully transfer it one-to-one to the final consumer version. It's mastered purely analog, only transferred directly from the tape, not from any digital files whatsoever. You can definitely hear the significant difference. You can clearly hear it, and it brings pure, unadulterated sound into the customer's home.
But isn't it incredibly difficult to gain access to these original master tapes from the initial recording sessions, from the final definitive takes in the very end? I can only imagine they are meticulously guarded like the most precious holy grail.
We're incredibly fortunate that since we've been actively involved in the music industry since the early to mid-1980s and have celebrated many significant and notable successes over the years, we've naturally and effectively built up the right and essential contacts. We already have access to well over 100 valuable analog tapes, but of course we're not going to release 50 or 100 a year like with CDs. We couldn't possibly process that many, and neither could the studio, because they also have to be able to replicate them.
What an amazing effort.
Yeah, it absolutely has to be done. Either we do it completely right or we simply don't do it at all, indeed.
So, dear friends, that was our trip to Breisgau to visit the company InAcoustic. We learned a lot about cables, but above all about music, and we're looking forward to the new master tapes. Be sure to join us again next time. See you soon.
Si sa, noi del sud parliamo a voce alta, si sa, noi del sud facciamo discussione imposta. Siamo allergici alle strisce, di restare in fila non ci riesce neanche ai funerali.